Counsel, there's some issue?
Well, there was an issue, yes, Your Honor. Mr. Lewin wanted to talk to the witness during my cross-examination.
Yeah.
He invited me to go back there. I didn't want to waive any objection I have to him talking to his witness during my cross-examination. I did go back in the room, and Mr. Lewin started to tell him what Dr. Wilk had said yesterday, and I stopped it, and Mr. Lewin stopped it, and I don't know what else went on, but I don't think that's proper.
Your Honor, I can cite to authority.
And let me address, Your Honor.
Let me hear the authority first, because
Okay,
I've never
so
heard.
I knew I remembered this, Your Honor. You had just told the witness not to talk to anybody about it.
Any witness. Now tell me the name. Tell me the authority you have.
There's a case called Perry v. Leak, Your Honor, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case, 488 U.S. 272, 1989, in which the court said that it was not error for the court to prevent a defense lawyer from speaking to his client witness during his testimony, and they said that that was not error for the court to enforce what I asked you, which was not to have Mr. Lewin speak to a witness during cross. So even when it affected Sixth Amendment rights, the Supreme Court said that it's okay for a judge to prevent that. I know you allowed it, I assume, because you didn't stop it. So in that respect, it's distinguishable, Your Honor, but when I told you that it shouldn't happen, I said it because I had a clear memory that, as the Supreme Court said, restrictions on attorneys' contact with witnesses during trial, not only to prevent coaching, but also to preserve the status quo during breaks in testimony is appropriate. So I had a memory of the case, I said it, I asked you not to, and that's the state of the record.
I think it's fair game for cross-examination, but yes, anything else?
Yes. So what happened, Your Honor, is the witness was critiqued by Mr. DeGuerin for having not been shown certain documents and being aware of the history of those documents. So I said to Mr. DeGuerin, I want to speak to the witness, but I want you to be there so you can hear exactly what I say.
I'm nodding my head because obviously that would be the ethical way to do such a thing.
And that's what I did. As I started to walk back there, Mr. Chesnoff starts screaming that not to go back there, that it's improper for me to do this. I told him it's not improper. And again, the reason that I was doing it, Your Honor, is that what is going on is that the witness is being asked about a situation with Dr. Cook, Dr. Wilk, the surgery rotation, etc., when he has no knowledge. And when Mr. DeGuerin specifically asked him, isn't it true Mr. Lewin never showed you any of those documents? So the purpose was that, and I have no idea why Mr. DeGuerin has gone this way. We had testimony from Dr. Wilk yesterday regarding exactly why Kathy Durst dropped out of the surgery rotation, which, by the way, is at the same time as the note that is being sent by Dr. Cook.
Right. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious from the other witness. But here, I mean, the question itself wasn't really fair. I mean, the question is, did you know that a professor had criticized her when you gave your opinion about her reputation in the community of students, and he of course wasn't allowed to explain his answer, and I enforced that, but it's not really a fair question, but that's all right. You can make that impression if you want, but I see no I want to bring the jury in. This is allowed, so you can cross on it. You talked to the DA, didn't you? And of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's fine.
Your Honor, just for the record, we would call that coaching.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, fair enough. You can say you can argue it to the jury later on that he must have coached that witness to say such a thing, but it's not really such a big thing.
Your Honor, I add, because I think it's important. It would be an improper argument for them to suggest that I coached the witness when, in fact, I invited Mr. DeGuerin to be there. There was nothing done separately. So I would say under 352, Your Honor, for the defense to even raise this issue, when as the court said, there's absolutely no ethical impropriety whatsoever. In fact, I don't even have to have them there, but I volunteered it, would be improper and create the inference, which they like to do, that something improper happened. The extent of it was, we went back there.
Slow down.
The extent of it was, we went back there, and before I could say anything, Mr. DeGuerin, Ms. Chesnoff interrupted, and we weren't able to speak. So I'm going to ask the court, Your Honor, to not allow, or else it requires me then to start asking a bunch of other questions about what actually happened, that Mr. DeGuerin was invited to be there. And under 352, it would certainly open up an issue that really should not be part of the jury's evaluation of the case.
I suggested it as a remedy to the extent they think it's a big deal, but it does seem like a big waste of time and an undue consumption of time under 352. I know that this witness rendered opinions that you think are harmful, but we spend so much time on this issue, which is not an element. The element is, does he know that Susan Berman is a witness when she is killed? That's what we're talking about, yet we're putting enormous energy into this and time into this question of whether...
You know, as the court's aware, I volunteered a stipulation at the defense request. I did it, and it was turned down.
But he volunteered a stipulation that would in effect be us waiving cross-examination of the witnesses. That's not.
You don't have to stipulate, that's fine. So, anyway, I had suggested that you could cross-examine, isn't it true? You talked to Mr. Lewin, but there's nothing wrong with it, so...
Well, another quick question of the court. You said
Yeah.
that you thought my question was unfair.
Yes.
And I'm going directly to his testimony about her reputation being good and whether he knew these other things that would indicate her reputation wasn't good.
But that wouldn't, no one would know about it, so it wouldn't bear upon the community reputation.
Well, he also testified that she was a good student and that so I have a right to go into that, Judge, and I don't think it's an unfair question at all.
And Your Honor, most respectfully, we're going down this road. You narrowed the case to what it's about. These are their witnesses. We don't have a choice but to deal with what they're presenting as part of their theory of prosecution, which we have asked to be limited on multiple occasions.
You know, we're not objecting to them going in this area. The court made its own observation. We're not objecting. The only objection I had is they should not be pointing out an inference that somehow I was unethical. If they want to cross-examine, which they've already done regarding Kathy's alleged issues in medical school, have at it. It's a dead end into a crashing wall, but that's fine.
Your Honor, I want it to be clear. I don't think Mr. Lewin was being unethical. I just don't think he was familiar with the experience of every defense lawyer in this courtroom that has never seen a prosecutor talk to a witness during cross-examination. And I was aware of the Supreme Court case that made it not even a Sixth Amendment violation to stop it. So I'm not accusing him of being unethical. I'm just stating what our experience, collective experience has been, and I did ask you to prevent it, and whatever happened after happened. But it's not an attack on him.
We're ready to
Okay,
get
good.
going.
What?
We're ready to get going with this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, you have a question, Mr. DeGuerin?
Yeah.
I understand your explanation, thank you.
I just don't want to be called down by saying it's an unfair question when it's a fair question, that I question the basis of his knowledge for stating about her reputation as being a good student, all the
Okay.
rest of it.
So your point is not to undermine the testimony about, so he's not wrong about her reputation, it's just everyone's wrong about her reputation because she actually quietly had a problem with school. Is that your point? I suppose the impression
No.
you're giving me is that he's wrong because he did not consider this fact when he described her excellent reputation with the other students. That's the impression. I thought you were trying to undermine that. Instead, you're trying to make a related point that excellent reputation was undeserved because she was having problems with her classes. Right? Is that
No.
what you're saying?
No. What I'm doing is what is allowed to do to any reputation witness. The reputation witness comes in and says, I think he's got a good reputation for peaceable, law-abiding citizen. You can then say, well, have you heard that he was arrested and charged and convicted of murder? Because that goes directly to the witness's knowledge about reputation.
I see.
Directly impeaches the witness.
I see. So the ultimate fact, it doesn't depend what the community is that holds the reputation. If the ultimate point is, does the reputation prove the trait? And the trait is not present because the community is wrong, not knowing about the secret fact or an unknown fact that you're bringing to light.
No. It's that the witness's opinion about the reputation is not based on full facts.
All right, I don't see it the same way you do, but I'll say that it's not an unfair question. At the time, it seemed a little misleading to me, which is why he wanted to explain it. But, okay, at the time, I thought it was misleading, but I will not comment on it further. Yes?
No, nothing, no objection. We're
Okay, may we have our jurors, please? All right, we're back in session. Mr. Durst is present with us. Lawyers, the people are represented. Dr. Safyer has resumed the witness stand. I'll remind you that you're under oath. And Mr. DeGuerin, you may continue with your cross-examination.
Dr. Safyer, on the screen still is the first page of Defendant's Exhibit C. And so we can be clear on this. You had no knowledge of this when you formed your opinion about her reputation. Is that right?
I never saw this before.
Okay. Let's look at it a little bit in depth. Mrs. Durst was unable to attend a large part of the clerkship, mostly due to ill health. Stop there. I asked you earlier at the outset of the cross-examination what would be a legitimate reason to miss classes, to miss part of the clerkship, and you said it would have to be serious ill health, right?
That's what it says.
But that's what you said also.
Yeah, but
Did you know?
I don't know
Kathy
what
Durst?
that's referring to, so it's hard for me to.
Well, just listen to the question.
Yeah,
You said, didn't you, that one reason to miss, the legitimate reason to miss classes or a clerkship would be serious ill health. Was that basically what you said?
without a doubt. Sure.
All right. But you knew Kathy Durst. Did you know her to be in ill health?
No.
As jumping forward later on to your supervision of the whole shooting match, as I put it, as a CEO, you know that there have been times when students have had drug problems, not addiction, but drug problems or alcohol problems or marital problems that have caused them to be less than efficient in their work, right?
No question about it.
Okay. But your knowledge personally of Kathy Durst during this period of time, you didn't know her to be missing classes, did you?
That's correct.
You didn't know her to be in ill health, did you?
No, I didn't know that she was having, medical problems. Or
But
if
yet
she
here it
was.
is in black and white. So it's something that you didn't know about when you formed your opinion about her reputation, right?
Well, it doesn't change how I feel about her in terms of what she was capable of.
Well, let's
It might give
examine that.
more, it shows, if this is correct, and I'm not saying it's not, it shows she needs some help.
But your opinion of her being a contemporary of hers and being in the community of students where everybody knows everybody, you didn't know that she was missing classes and in ill health, did you?
Your Honor, that assumes fact, not evidence regarding missing classes.
Overruled. You didn't know that.
Nor would I know that, necessarily.
Well, nor would you know that. Well, perhaps you wouldn't know about the missing of classes, but if she were sick, seriously ill, during the time that you knew her, you would know that, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily.
Did you ever know her to be seriously ill enough to miss classes?
When you go to a doctor, you're not expecting them
Your Honor,
to tell
could you ask
people
him to
what's
be
going on.
responsive?
So,
no.
rather than explain your answer, if you stuck to yes and no, you'd probably be okay.
No.
Yes,
The answer was
but.
no.
You could say yes, but, and then,
Yep.
but constrain your answer to the question.
I
without
could know
explaining
and
it.
I could not know. It really depends on who's broadcasting that. A patient, a doctor.
Not
others.
responsive.
It's private.
I'll strike it.
Instruct the jury, Your Honor, that
Disregard the portions that I strike. Disregard that.
let's go to the second page of Exhibit C. Can you see that, Doctor?
I can.
Can you read it? It's a memoranda from the same doctor. This one is in July of 1981, about 9 months after the earlier one we just had on the screen. From the same doctor, this is to remind you that your radiology clerkship that you started in November of 1980 was never completed. In spite of repeated memos and telephone calls, you have not contacted us, and you have failed to return the 3 books. Skipping. This is unfair to other students, to say the least. First, let's establish you were unaware of this going on with Kathy in July of 1981. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
And when you told this jury your opinion about Kathy Durst, you were unaware of this matter, correct?
That's implicit. Yes.
Would the court rule on his objection, Your Honor?
Objection?
He said he just objected that that was duplicitous.
No, if I had never seen it, I didn't know it.
Said
Okay.
implicit.
He said it's implicit.
Sorry, I misunderstood it, and
Oh,
I'm gonna chalk that up to the mask.
Okay?
Had you known that there was apparently this problem going on as documented in her medical records, or I mean her records at the medical school, would that have affected your opinion about whether she was the excellent student that you said she was?
no.
You would just have ignored that?
Well, I'll answer your question, but you'll probably say that I'm talking too much.
I do say that.
Yeah, okay, so
That's neither here nor
it
there.
depends on what it is and why she's not getting treatment. And this doesn't, it's not enough for me to make a decision.
Let's go to
From
page
somebody I don't
3.
even know.
I'm sorry?
Somebody he doesn't, I'm sorry. The person who wrote this is someone he doesn't know. He's adding to his reasons.
Oh, well, then let's leave that up for a second. Do you question the authenticity,
Authenticity, I think.
authenticity, excuse me. That's too many syllables for a country boy. Do you question the authenticity of this record?
I have no way of determining the value or authenticity or whatever you're going to say about this because I don't know the person. And it's incomplete, to be honest.
Incomplete.
It doesn't give you a there's no definition of what is wrong. In fact, it begs the question, what's wrong?
It does beg a question. Something's wrong if she's acting like this.
If it's true, I agree with you.
So then, again, this is something that you did not take into consideration in forming your opinion that you stated to this jury about her being, and I'm paraphrasing, an excellent student.
I hope you realize this, I never examined her or took care of her. I wasn't her doctor. In fact, I wasn't a doctor then. And this
Let's
is
go
a
to
doctor
page-
I don't know, so.
Let's go to page 3 of Exhibit C, please. Here's another student evaluation by Dr. Hubbard. Do you know Dr. Hubbard?
Wait, just move that away for a second. Yeah, it looks like, no, I don't.
David Hubbard, I believe, is what the
Yeah, I
signature
don't.
says.
I don't know.
Did you take a neurology clerkship?
No. Or if I do, I didn't remember it. I don't think I took it, no.
It's kind of hard to remember things that long ago, isn't it? 40 years ago.
I definitely don't remember every, thing that I signed up for and did. This would be not necessarily part of what everybody had to do. This would be a choice, probably, usually.
So neurology was an elective, or neurology clerkship would have been an elective?
That's how I remember it
Okay.
at that time.
By the way, later in your career as a CEO, you encouraged the accurate keeping of records, didn't you?
No, I hired people who would do that.
Well-
It hardly was me that was doing that.
So you hired people to do it, but the principle was to have accurate records, right?
Accurate, timely, and comprehensive, correct.
And by
But
people,
that was not anything that was, on my,
records kept by people in a position to know, right?
well, now everything's computerized, as we were talking
I
later.
didn't ask
so-
you about that. Whoever
So the
makes
answer is
the
yes.
entry in the records is supposed to be somebody with personal knowledge. Isn't that right?
Of course.
All right. So let's look at what Dr. Hubbard said. At the bottom, Kathleen unfortunately had an illness in her family and was unable to complete the clerkship. She plans to make up the missing period later in the year. This is July of '81. Did you have any knowledge about an illness in Kathy's family during this time?
No. Later, yes.
Well, I'm speaking obviously of what about this document and what Dr. Hubbard said, that she had an illness in her family and was unable to complete the clerkship. Did you know anything about her having an illness in her family that caused her to have to not complete a clerkship?
Well, I said no.
All
I'll
right,
say it again.
thank you. Now let's get back to the phone call. Assuming for a moment that Kathy had a personal relationship with Dr. Jean Cook, the assistant dean for students, assuming that he had in the past reached out to try to help her and had intervened with the registrar on a registration for a class, and assuming that there had been other clerkships that she'd had to either repeat or drop out of, and assuming that on February the 1st, she was sick and called the medical school for Dr. John Cook, the assistant dean for students. That is not out of the ordinary, is it?
It's not common.
Maybe not common, but it was ordinary enough for you to say to Mr. Lewin in your interview that she probably called whatever the equivalent of the dean of students was. So the call was not out of the ordinary.
Your Honor, the
Was
question assumes a fact, not an evidence, and the question is asked based on that fact.
I think it's a foundational question. The question seems, I'm not sure the context of the question. Could you expand it a little bit?
I'll try to break it down and make it a little bit simpler.
Not just the question, but the context. I'm not sure this is the same context. I can't tell
Well,
from what you're
the
reading.
context is I'm talking about the call that he says he heard about.
Okay.
And I'm talking about what's established in the record, in the medical records of the school. That is, that Dr. John Cook, assistant dean for students, had reached out to Kathy when she was having problems and had intervened with her, for her, with the
Okay.
registrar.
I got that part. Thank you, Mr. DeGuerin.
Given that that establishes a relationship with John Cook,
No, I got that
And-
part. So wait. So you said this question assumes a fact, not an evidence?
Yes, so what Mr.
The
Garrett
fact
said-
is, the missing fact is,
No, the fact he's assuming, he's basically stating that position as a fact, that he's asking a question as if that statement is a fact. That statement is not proven. Therefore, it's an improper question. It's similar to, when is the last time you beat your wife?
oh, that's not, that's really-
Which assumes
Okay.
a fact, not an evidence, that the
Right.
wife has been beaten. It's an
Right.
improper question.
okay, Paul, let me look at this. Hold a minute. Ask the question again, please.
And so the hypothetical, and assuming, I'm asking you to assume that there was a relationship between Kathy Durst and the assistant dean of students, John Cook. It's not in the document you're looking for,
Yeah,
sir.
that's what I
It's,
meant.
that's not in that
Yeah,
document.
okay,
This
well, I was-
is going back to what we've already established with the personal note, and the next day, Dean Cook sending a memo to the registrar. Assuming there's at least that relationship between John Cook and Kathy Durst, if she were ill and unable to make her clerkship, it makes sense that she would call the man she had the personal relationship, the dean of students, doesn't it?
There's a series of, you're saying
That's a
it
yes
is,
or no.
we should assume. I don't see how I do that.
Yeah, so I
say
think
no.
it's,
I'll say no. Is that good?
yes, that's good. That's your answer. It's good.
That's your answer.
I don't know what went
And I
on
want
before.
to compare that answer with what you told Mr. Lewin. She probably called whatever the equivalent of the dean of students was.
This is 352, this is the fifth time he's gone into the
No,
same
that's
question.
the
Okay,
third
hold on.
time.
352. Also asked and answered.
I'm not sure the hypothetical compares to, well, yeah. I don't have this whole, see, you're referring to a document I don't have, so this is a problem for me, so sustain. want to supply me with the document, that'll help me.
I can show you the transcript of the telephone call, Your Honor.
Give the court a copy.
I'm sorry?
Give the court a copy.
You know, the people's objection is that the witness has been asked about his quote, this is now the 5th time during the examination.
Well, yeah, but it's a cross, that part's okay. Will you give the bailiff, please, the document, pass it around? Thank you.
It's the second sticky of 3.
Okay. All right, you may ask the question, Mr. DeGuerin.
I'd like to put this page on the screen, Your Honor.
Yes.
I
Any
don't-
objection?
Yes, that's not proper.
Okay, sustain. You may not publish it.
May I approach the witness again?
Yes.
Read that to yourself again. I think I've showed it to you already, but read it to yourself again. That's a transcript of your conversation with Mr. Lewin, in which he recorded you but didn't tell you he was recording you. And
Thanks for that, Mr. DeGuerin. You added that gratuitously, you understand.
In case they missed it the first
Right,
2 times.
okay,
he
go
brought it.
ahead.
have you read it?
All right,
Have you read it?
I'm reading it. I'll tell you when I'm finished.
You know, I'm going to again ask that Mr. DeGuerin is being exceptionally rude to
No,
this witness.
no, No, no. I've seen emotions rise today. We'll let the doctor take his time to read through this, to refresh his recollection.
Thank you.
Well,
Just
I don't
does-
remember this, but it reads.
Does it refresh your recollection as to the conversation?
It doesn't, it seems plausible or possible. Yeah.
All right, so now Mr. DeGuerin is going to hand that back to Mr. DeGuerin, and he's going to ask you some questions now that your memory's refreshed about this conversation that you'd had, apparently.
Well, I don't remember the conversation, but I will answer the questions.
Your Honor, and we have a foundation objection. He attempted to refresh his recollection. The witness has said he does not remember the conversation. Therefore, Your Honor, unless the court makes a finding of deliberate evasiveness, it is not a prior inconsistent
Okay.
statement. It's not refreshing recollection.
Right, it's, it wouldn't be a, we'll see. It depends on the question.
Do you agree that if this is correct, you even named who you thought was?
Questions objectionable cannot be saved.
Well, thanks for saving me time. I didn't have to hear the whole question, did I? Finish your question, please. Or rephrase it, given the objection.
I believe you said that it's, having seen this, that it is possible that you said that.
Your Honor, again, the witness.
right?
The witness says,
Overruled. Is it
I
possible?
think I already said that.
Yeah, say it again.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, you even named a Steve Lazar as who you thought was the assistant dean for students, right?
The titles
Did you
that-
name Steve Lazar?
I can't. I don't remember that.
Who
I
is Steve
could've.
Lazar?
I could have. Oh, he was another associate dean.
Okay, so you could have.
None of them
you-
are the dean.
You admit that you could have said that she probably called whatever the equivalent of the dean of students was, and you could have said Steve Lazar, right?
I'll say that again, yes.
Okay. So this gets back to the question
Can I,
that it's entirely plausible that if Kathy was feeling that she couldn't come to the first day of that clerkship, she would call the assistant dean of students, who she had a special relationship with,
Your Honor,
and who had intervened for her before.
it's an improper question.
Do you understand the question?
I definitely understand the question.
And then your answer?
It could have been a number of people.
Including,
But it's plausible, yes.
including Jean Cook.
Well, I don't really remember him.
Didn't you tell us that?
This is 40
Didn't,
years ago.
It's 40 years ago, and you're testifying about other things you remember. I understand that.
Right, sure.
But having seen Dr. Cook's letterhead, didn't you say earlier today that that refreshed your recollection about who John Cook was? Let's
I
put that
think
back up.
I
There's
remember
the first
him.
page of Exhibit B.
Where is it now?
Sorry, you, did that refresh your recollection about who John Cook was?
I speculated about who he is. I didn't say it's definitely him or it was the right person. I didn't say that. But I vaguely remember him. She obviously needed help.
Yeah. Wait till there's a question.
She obviously needed help.
Correct.
Um,
In retrospect.
So if she needed help, it would make sense to call the dean that had helped her before, wouldn't it?
So don't answer the question you're asking me.
No, I'm asking
You
the
said,
question.
wouldn't it? My
Yes.
answer to the question is it depends exactly what the problem was, and it's not clear from this.
I'm not asking you about the problem on March of 1981. I'm talking to you about whatever problem it was that prompted her to call Dr. Cook and be referred to Dr. Cooperman.
Your Honor, this is assuming facts, not in evidence.
Sustained.
It's also vague and, thank you.
In retrospect, I think
don't
anybody
like this.
that knew any of this feels bad. She needed
Judge,
help.
he's just gonna talk whenever he wants to talk. I object to it.
Yeah.
That's not what a witness is supposed to do.
That's right. You can't just, it's not a dialogue like we would have in an ordinary civilized
I got it,
conversation. This is court.
I got it.
You have to wait for the question and answer only the question.
And there are not gonna be any more questions.
All right, redirect.
Doctor, you've been asked about a lot of academic records of Kathy Durst today by Mr. DeGuerin. Have you ever seen any of those before?
No.
Specifically, you've been shown these medical records about, these academic records regarding Kathy's performance in different clerkships that are anywhere between 8 months and a year before she disappeared. Do you recall being shown that?
You know, that's what it appears to be. I didn't count the exact. but
Is
yeah.
there anything about,
We can be heard.
I'm sorry, yes. I'll see
is,
that.
is there anything about what you've been shown by Mr. DeGuerin, doctor, that changes the opinion that you previously gave, that you do not believe that it was consistent, I believe you used the word incomprehensible, that Kathy Durst would have called the dean to report herself absent rather than the rotation she was supposed to work at that day?
You're gonna like this, correct?
Doctor, I want to refer to you. You were asked and you were shown a radiology evaluation from Kathy Durst that was during sometime in 1981. Do you recall being shown that a moment ago by Mr. DeGuerin? I want you to take a look at the exhibit, and this is people's
You got it.
People's 25A, and this is going to be page 53. I want you to look at the date of this rotation. I want you to indicate what rotation this is and what the date is. No, we've got the wrong one.
March, it's
No,
March 20.
we have the wrong one up. We get the right one. Okay, here we go. I'm sorry. This is the radiology rotation, the evaluation. Can you tell me what the date is for that?
January 24th, 1982.
And based on your experience, would that mean, doctor, that radiology rotation lasted from December 28, 1981 to January 24th, 1982?
Well, that's what it implies.
And in your experience, in looking at this record, does that appear to be the approximate time that a rotation would last? We've had a stipulation, I'll withdraw that. We've had a stipulation to these records that they are true and accurate. So I want you to assume this is an accurate record. And I want to further ask you, I want you to assume that Kathy Durst disappeared, never to be seen again, on January 31st, about January 31st, 1982. I want you...
That's a date that's in contention, of course, Your Honor.
Yes.
Assume that fact.
I want you to assume that she disappears 7 days later. And I want you to further assume that this is the last evaluation or rotation that Kathy Durst was on prior to disappearing. You understand me so far?
I do.
I want you to tell me, and I want you to read, doctor, what is the actual narrative on the evaluation? You can read it out loud,
Oh,
please.
okay. Ms. Durst is a very pleasant student who displayed keen interest in the subject, although she missed several sessions. She has a fair grasp of the background basic sciences and has sufficient clinical knowledge to be able to arrive at the logical conclusion. She is fairly quick in picking up radiological abnormalities and is a keen observer. She participates actively in group discussions and is eager to do a good job. It's an outstanding Evaluation.
Doctor, let me ask you something. Is that evaluation consistent with a medical student who was failing out of medical school?
No.
Is that evaluation consistent with a medical student who has a severe cocaine problem in your experience?
No.
Now, I want to ask you something, because Mr. DeGuerin has asked you a lot of questions about comments that were in evaluations. So, you were asked specifically about a surgery rotation from March of 1981. Do you recall that?
Vaguely, yes.
Do you have any idea what was going on in Kathy's life in March of 1981?
I knew more about it after she disappeared. I knew some about it before.
Well, I'm just asking you.
Calls for hearsay.
Overall?
I'm asking you, as you sit here right now, doctor, I want you to assume the following. I want you to assume that Dr. Peter Wilk, who was in charge of that rotation, testified yesterday in this courtroom by video, that during that rotation in March of 1981,
Excuse me, my objection is, I believe it's improper to tell one witness what another witness is testifying to.
It's a hypothetical. It's this overruled. Go ahead.
Thank you. Doctor, I want you to assume that Dr. Wilk testified that at the time of the surgery rotation, Kathy came to him extremely upset about having witnessed an episode of violence involving her husband and told Dr. Wilk that Mr. Durst was homicidal. Would that explain to you, as someone who is in charge ultimately of the entire Einstein Medical School, why someone might not have performed well in that rotation?
Without any doubt.
I want you to further assume, doctor, that the letter that you were shown previously that Dr. Cook sent to Kathy Durst was sent at the same time as a letter that was sent, contact that was made by Dr. Wilk to Dr. Cook to advise him of Kathy Durst's problems. Are you understanding so far?
I am.
Would you expect then that a dean like Dr. Cook, being advised by an attending that a student is saying that her husband is homicidal and violent and struggling at that rotation, that attending would have an ethical duty to contact the medical school and let them know what's going on?
I would assume that.
And is there anything about the statements that are made in the rotation, in the evaluation? So as an example, some of the evaluations you were shown say that a family member of Kathy Durst was sick. Do you recall being shown that?
I do.
Do you know, doctor, if that's true, or if instead that was Kathy Durst ashamed of the fact that her husband was beating her?
Well, that's argumentative. That's pure speculation. It's argumentative.
Speculation.
Yeah.
Well, sustained speculation.
Doctor, I want you to assume that an individual, a medical student, is being beaten by her husband. I want you to further assume that that medical student is missing parts of her rotation. Would you expect, in your experience, and I want to go back to 1982, 1981, 1980, that a medical student, female medical student, would be in a position where they would likely go in and say, I'm failing because I'm being abused by my husband?
There's no basis for this. There's no,
That's
That's the
That's
testimony, Your
speculation.
Honor.
Hold on a second. I don't have my, I have to look at the text.
Your Honor, as well as Mr. Durst's own statements.
Sorry, I'm reading and now you're speaking.
All right.
Wait. So, make a different objection.
well, speculation. And
Sustain.
Doctor, I want to ask you if in your experience, have you ever had employees, you've supervised 50,000 of them, who have had issues with domestic violence?
Unfortunately, yes.
And doctor, in those situations, have those employees always come forward and said, hey, listen, the reason I'm not performing well is because my husband's abusing and beating me?
I don't know the exact, percentage, but I would say the vast
It calls for
majority.
hearsay.
People are ashamed when that happens.
Calls for hearsay,
Overall.
and it's speculative, and it's also cumulative.
It's in response to
Yeah, no, it's
cross-examination.
overruled.
Your Honor, I'm not
Answer
sure.
me, Stan.
I couldn't hear the witness's response. Can the witness please respond?
Well, we can read it back to you.
I don't know the exact percentage, but I will say the vast majority of people are ashamed.
And is that your personal experience, doctor, from heading one of the largest medical organizations in the country?
It's personal, and it's definitely an issue in medical training and other disciplines that people do.
Now, Mr. DeGuerin didn't show you this, but I want to show you People's 25A, page 58. Were you aware, doctor, that Kathy Durst actually passed her surgery rotation with Dr. Wilk? I want you to read the narrative evaluation. And you can read that out loud, please.
You want me to?
You know what, I can read it just as easily.
Okay.
Ms. Kathleen Durst has fully satisfied, Mr. Henderson's testing my vision, the requirements for the third-year surgical clerkship. She began the clerkship in March 1981 and was doing well until forced by personal reasons to interrupt it. She subsequently demonstrated good knowledge in a written examination, and the department is satisfied that Ms. Durst has completed the requirements for the clerkship. Doctor, I want to ask you, based on your experience, does this mean that Kathy Durst passed her surgery clerkship?
It appears that way.
So when you were asked questions before about her having failed the clerkship, this is information you were not considering, is that correct?
I actually didn't know that she didn't, but I assumed that somebody, yeah.
I want to further ask you, it says in this narrative evaluation that she was forced by personal reasons to interrupt it. Do you know what those personal reasons were?
Speculation.
I'm asking if he knows.
Overruled. Do you know yes or no?
People were concerned that she was being abused before
wait.
anything happened.
That's speculation. He's guessing. He
Okay,
doesn't know that.
speculation. Questions are objectionable if they call for speculation.
Yeah.
The answer is
Well, speculation. He's speculating.
yes. One may answer with speculation. The objections are to questions. Did the answer respond to the question?
It's not responsive.
Sustained. It's stricken.
One moment, Your Honor. Doctor, you were specifically asked about the original interview that you had in 2015 by Mr. DeGuerin, where you were asked. Oh, I'm sorry.
We can't hear you. The people, if we can't hear you, the folks in the corners certainly can't hear you, Mr. Lewin. I know that you.
I'm
Voice.
gonna get louder.
Yeah, good.
We'll waive them being able to hear.
Okay.
It's kind of mean, Mr. DeGuerin, but I'll keep going. Doctor, you were asked numerous questions about an interview that you gave in 2015 by Mr. DeGuerin. Do you recall that?
By who?
By Mr. DeGuerin asked you questions about the interview you gave in
Yeah.
2015. Do you recall that?
Not really.
No, do you know?
I recall him
Do you recall
saying
you're not going to forget the questions he asked you, correct?
No.
And doctor, in answering those questions and in giving the original interview, have you ever believed that in fact Kathy Durst allegedly calling the dean and not calling the rotation where she was supposed to report was a reasonable and in fact a normal or anything other than an incomprehensible event?
That's argumentative and it calls for opinion.
Overruled. You may answer.
It's not something that she would have done.
And if I ask you on a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being, oh yeah, you know what, I'm absolutely, I'm certain, I did my scale wrong. With 0 being, there's absolutely no way she would have done that, given what medical students do and your experience, et cetera. And 100 being, oh yes, I absolutely believe she would have done that. What would your answer be?
It doesn't, it's close to 100, to 0% that she would do it. Now,
So it's a 0% chance that she would
Yeah.
do that. Is that correct?
correct.
And doctor, in terms of your coming out here to testify, do you have any interest or motivation or bias with respect to this proceeding?
No,
Did you fight your subpoena to come out here? In other words, did you come out here voluntarily?
absolutely.
And in terms of your position, when you were first contacted, you were leading the 50,000 employee Montefiore Einstein medical group in New York. Is that correct?
It's not relevant and
Overall.
beyond the scope of cross.
Overall.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And doctor, upon being contacted, have you in every way been cooperative and extended your cooperation with respect to anything that you could do to assist in getting to the truth of what happened to Kathy Durst?
It's my responsibility. Yes.
I have no further questions.
Mr. DeGuerin.
I just want to concentrate on one thing that you've said. It's not something she would have done. I believe I've quoted you correctly on that.
I'd
That is,
appreciate if you put
making
it
the
in
call
context.
to Dean Cook that was switched to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Let me start over. I want to concentrate on one thing you said, and that it was referring to the call. Everybody's now talks about it as a call. It's not something she would have done.
Your Honor, just for clarification, can we stipulate that we're referring to the February 1st, 1982 alleged call? We've talked about several things, and I want to make sure the record's clear. That is what Mr. DeGuerin's asking about. but it's-
Thank you. I'm not sure it's right for you to interrupt the examination to ask to agree to stipulate to his point, but.
The call is the call.
Right.
The
You don't
call
need a-
on
do you need a
February the 1st.
stipulation right now? Do you need a stipulation that that's what we're talking about?
I think everybody understands we're talking about the call.
Okay, that's a no, so go ahead, ask
All
the
right.
question. Again, please don't interrupt. Go ahead.
It's not something she would have done, meaning the call to Cook or to Cooperman. In the 40 years since that call, have you one time gone to any authorities to say that you believe she would not have made that call?
Have I ever said that to someone? Is that the
No.
question?
Did you ever go to the authorities before you talked to Mr. Lewin in November of 2015? Did you ever go to the authorities and say, look, I don't think Kathy made that call?
No, I didn't.
And how do you reconcile your statement today with saying to Mr. Lewin in November of 2015, she probably called whatever the equivalent of the dean of students was? How do you reconcile those two statements? They're inconsistent, aren't they? Let me
No,
put it that
I
way.
don't think they're
They're
inconsistent.
inconsistent, aren't they?
You may explain your answer. You may answer and explain your answer.
People sometimes go to the wrong person to solve something. I could speculate he's a very nice person. and very warm. So she might have felt comfortable with that. I do believe she had other things going on that she really needed to get to the bottom of.
Sure, I didn't ask you about those other things, but bottom line is you concede that she could have called the dean, right?
Oh, it's totally possible, yes.
Go ahead.
Doctor, can you imagine a scenario where Kathy Durst would have called a dean at the medical school to say that she was not going to be at a rotation at the hospital and not also called the rotation to say she was not going to be there?
Repetitious.
Overruled. You may answer.
Answer that? 100%, 150%.
150% what?
That she, no matter what, she knew who she should have called.
And who would that have been?
Oh, wait a minute.
Overruled.
Objection. That-
Overruled. Answer.
The answer
My
would
objection
be,
is to the,
so there, it would be,
is to him speaking of her state of mind. He doesn't have
Overruled.
basis for knowledge, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer.
yeah, it would be, the correct person would be somebody who is overseeing that training program that she was participating in. So it would differ with different, surgery or internal medicine or whatever. So she would have, there's nobody that wouldn't have called the person who was an intern or resident that was in charge of that group. Those are the people on the ground.
Thank you. No further questions.
No further question.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Please.
You're excused, doctor. Thank
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's a little early, but I'm a little tired this morning, and I'd like to take a little break. You too? Yeah. So I'm going to excuse you till 1:30. Remember, do not talk about the case or about any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Do not make up your mind about the verdict or any issue until after you discuss the case with the other jurors during deliberations. And of course, as always, no tweeting, Facebook, or other social media regarding this. You're excused to 1:30.